Most people don't lose because they lack intelligence. They lose because their intelligence leaks. They speak too soon. They explain too much. They react before they understand the game. And here's the uncomfortable truth: reactions. People can read you easily. They can control you quietly. Pause for a second and think about that. How many times have you said more than necessary, trusted too quickly, or revealed your thinking just to feel understood, only to be overlooked, undermined, or subtly pushed aside later? It's not bad luck. It's not toxic people. It's exposure. Because in the real world, intelligence isn't measured by what you know. It's measured by what you withhold, time, and control. And most people have never been taught that. Here's something rarely said out loud. The person who speaks less is often the one being studied the most. Why? Because uncertainty creates tension, and tension creates power. There's always that one individual in the room. You've seen them. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't reveal their position. They don't react the way everyone expects through. And strangely, people adjust around them. They're asked fewer questions, but given more respect. They say less, but influence more. They move slower, yet somehow they stay 10 steps ahead. So what do they understand that most people don't? That control doesn't begin with dominance. It begins with restraint. Long before modern psychology tried to label it, observers of human nature already saw the pattern. Clearly, people don't just listen. They probe, test, and adapt the moment they feel they understand you. And the moment you become predictable, you become manageable. So here's the real question. What would change in your life if people couldn't easily figure you out? If your reactions weren't obvious, your intentions weren't exposed, and your thinking couldn't be anticipated. That's what this video is about. Not becoming louder, not becoming more aggressive, but becoming harder to read, harder to pressure, and harder to replace. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down 7 ruthless laws, principles that sharpen your intelligence, discipline your behavior, and quietly place you steps ahead of almost everyone around you. They're not comfortable. They won't flatter your but once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. And more importantly, you'll start noticing exactly where you've been giving your power away. Law 1. It starts the moment you realize something most men never admit: you've been talking too much. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way you were taught that being understood keeps you safe. It doesn't. It makes you traceable. Watch any room closely, and you'll see it play out in real time. One man is explaining himself, over-clarifying, trying to make sure everyone gets him. His tone slightly tense, his words just a bit too fast, and another man says almost nothing, just listens, holds eye contact a second longer than comfortable, gives half answers, and somehow the second man walks away with more respect. More curiosity around him, more control. That difference is not charisma, it's positioning. The first mistake most men make is thinking clarity equals strength. It doesn't. Clarity, when given freely, becomes exposure, and exposure is leverage. I've seen it happen in small ways that look harmless at first. A guy tells a woman exactly how much he likes her, lays out his intentions, tries to be real. A week later, she's pulling back, testing him, sensing there's no mystery left, no tension, nothing to figure out. He gave her the entire map, and now she knows exactly where to step. Same thing everywhere. Once people understand your patterns, they stop respecting your boundaries and start navigating around them. What's dangerous is that it feels right in the moment. You feel honest, open, transparent, but under the surface, you're handing over pieces of your internal world, your timing, your reactions, your limits, and once that pattern is visible, you become predictable. And predictable men are easy to manage, easy to test, easy to replace. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the shift is internal, not external. You'll feel the urge to explain, to correct, to defend yourself. When someone misunderstands you, you'll feel that pressure in your chest, that instinct to set the record straight. That's not strength, that's conditioning. And every time you give into it, you lose position without even noticing. Remember a situation where a man was being subtly disrespected in a group, small comments, light jokes, nothing overt. He laughed it off, then tried to explain himself, justifies his choices, prove he wasn't what they implied, and with every word, it got worse. Because now he was confirming that he could be moved on. Meanwhile, another guy in the same room was getting tested too, but he didn't bite, didn't explain, just looked, paused, and let the silence stretch. The joke stopped, not because he fought back, but because there was nothing to grab onto. No reaction, no access. That's the difference when people can't read your internal state. They lose their grip on you. Guilt doesn't land the same, pressure doesn't stick, urgency loses its edge, door P's. All of those tactics depend on visibility. They need to see hesitation, desire, attachment. Remove that, and suddenly there's nothing to manipulate. This isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone else. It's about containment, saying less than you could, revealing only what serves you, leaving gaps that force others to reveal themselves instead. Because while they're trying to figure you out, they're exposing their own patterns, their own insecurities, their own intentions, and now the dynamic shifts without a word being spoken. At first, it will feel unnatural, calming. You'll sit in silence. When you want to speak, you'll hold back. When you want to clarify, and it will almost feel like you're losing control, but the opposite is happening. You're taking it back piece by piece, moment by moment. Over time, something subtle changes. People stop probing you as much. They become more careful with their words. They hesitate before testing you, not because you became aggressive, but because you became unreadable, contained, and in a world where most men are constantly leaking information. That alone sets you apart. Because at the end of the day, power doesn't come from being fully seen. It comes from deciding what remains hidden, and once you understand that, you stop performing for approval and start operating from position. Law 2. It becomes clear at a certain point, the world doesn't reward honesty the way you were taught. It rewards control, and more specifically, control over perception. Because what people think they know about you will always matter more than what is actually true. Most men walk into interactions trying to be understood, trying to be seen as real, transparent, straightforward. They answer questions fully, they explain their motives, they reveal their plans as if clarity will earn them respect. But what actually happens is far more brutal. The more visible you become, the more predictable you become, and the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you become, the easier it is to position against you. You felt this before. Even if you didn't name it, you tell someone exactly what you're working on, what you want, how you think, and suddenly their behavior shifts, subtly at first. They start adjusting, testing, probing, because now they have data, and data is leverage. They don't need to oppose you directly. They just need to move around what you've already exposed. I've seen this play out in situations that look almost insignificant on the surface. A man in a negotiation reveals his urgency. Just a slight hint, a small comment about needing to close soon. From that moment on, the other side slows everything down, stretches time, increases pressure. Not because they're smarter, but because he gave them the one thing they needed: visibility. Or with women, it's even more unforgivingness. A man who reveals full interest too early, who makes his intentions obvious, who removes all uncertainty. He thinks he's being direct, but what he's actually doing is collapsing tension. And once tension is gone, so is intrigue. Now she knows exactly where he stands. There's nothing left to discover, nothing left to test. And without that, attraction starts to decay quietly. This is where most men get it wrong. They think manipulation requires lies, deception, complex strategies. It doesn't. Most of the time, all it requires is that you reveal too much, too soon, to the wrong person, and they will do the rest naturally. Information is not just communication, it's currency, and yet most people spend it like it has no value, handing out details, motives, weaknesses, patterns, without ever asking what they're getting in return. And once it's out, it cannot be taken back. It becomes part of how others calculate around you. The shift happens when you start treating your own mind like a restricted space. Not everything gets access. Not everything gets explained. Not everything gets revealed. You begin to answer questions without giving full context. You speak in controlled layers. You leave gaps on purpose. Not to confuse, but to maintain position. And here's the interesting part. When you stop oversharing, people don't lose interest. They lean in, they watch more closely, they listen more carefully, they try to read between the lines because now there is something to figure out, something unresolved, something that creates tension. And tension pulls attention. You'll notice it quickly. The same people who used to ignore you start paying attention. The same ones who tested you start hesitating. Not because you became louder or more aggressive, but because you became less accessible, and what is less accessible is always perceived as more valuable. There's a quiet power in being partially unknown, in letting people operate on assumptions instead of facts. Because assumptions are unstable, they create doubt, hesitation, second-guessing, and while they're navigating uncertainty, you remain clear, controlled, and untouched. This doesn't mean you lie, and it doesn't mean you play a character. It means you become selective, intentional, precise. You reveal when it serves you, not when it relieves emotional pressure. You speak when it moves the situation forward, not when it satisfies someone else's curiosity. Over time, this builds something most men never experience, a form of quiet authority that doesn't need validation. You're present, but not exposed, involved, but not predictable. And that combination makes people adjust around you without understanding why. Because in the end, perception is the battlefield, and the man who controls what is seen, what is known, and what remains hidden is the one who dictates how others move. Law 3. It hits you when you realize something most men get backwards. Empathy isn't weakness, it's surveillance, and the moment you stop feeling with people and start reading them, the entire dynamic shifts in your favor. Most men were conditioned to think empathy means being nice, agreeable, understanding, almost soft, so they walk into conversations trying to relate, trying to connect, trying to show they get it. And what they don't see is that while they're busy expressing emotion, the other person is revealing structure, patterns, insecurities, pressure points, and it goes completely unnoticed. Watch closely and you'll start seeing it everywhere. A man throws a passive-aggressive comment, subtle, almost disguised as a joke. Most people react to the surface. They defend, they laugh it off, they get slightly irritated, but if you slow down and look beneath it, the signal is obvious. Insecurity, status testing, a need to reposition himself in the hierarchy, and the moment you see that, the interaction stops being emotional and becomes strategic. That's the shift. You stop reacting to what is said and start analyzing why it was said. I remember a situation where a guy kept interrupting another man in a group conversation, cutting him off mid-sentence, speaking over him. On the surface, it looked like confidence, dominance even, but if you looked closer, it was fragile. Overcompensation, a need to control attention, because he couldn't hold it naturally. The man being interrupted got frustrated, tried to assert himself, raised his tone, and lost instantly, because he reacted to the behavior instead of understanding the mechanism behind it. A man who understands pragmatic empathy would do something different. He wouldn't compete for the floor, wouldn't show irritation. He'd slow down, speak less, hold eye contact, let the other man overextend, and eventually expose himself, because when someone is driven by insecurity, the more space you give them, the more they reveal. This is where most men fail. They think winning is about reacting better, arguing harder, asserting more. But real control comes from seeing the invisible drivers behind behavior. Fear, validation, ego, desire. Once you see those, you don't need to fight the surface. You adjust the root. It works the same way with women, and this is where it becomes even more revealing. A woman pulls back, becomes distant, replies slower. Most men panic, they chase, they ask what's wrong, they try to fix it. But that reaction is based on emotion, not understanding. Because the pullback isn't random, it's a test, a recalibration of perceived value, sometimes even a response to over-availability. And when you react emotionally, you confirm the very weakness being tested. But when you see it for what it is, you don't chase, you don't question, you don't collapse into reassurance. You adjust your behavior calmly, you create space, you let her come back into your frame, and now the dynamic flips, not because you forced it, but because you understood it. This is why pragmatic empathy is dangerous, because it separates understanding from agreement. You can see exactly why someone disrespects you without tolerating it. You can recognize manipulation without becoming emotional about it. You can understand attraction dynamics without becoming dependent on them. You stop taking things personally and start taking them seriously. Every interaction becomes a system: inputs, reactions, incentives, outcomes. You're no longer inside the emotion. You're observing it from above, almost detached. That distance gives you precision. Over time, something changes in you. Frustration disappears, not because people improve, but because you see through them. Behavior stops being random. It becomes predictable. Patterns repeat. Signals become obvious. Intentions become visible before they are spoken. And that's where the real power sits, not in controlling people directly, but in understanding them so clearly that their next move is already accounted for. They think they're acting freely. You're already positioned for the outcome. Because the man who reacts is always late, but the man who reads is already ahead. Law 4. At some point, if you're honest with yourself, you'll notice something uncomfortable. Most of your decisions were never fully yours. They were reactions, subtle adjustments to keep approval, to avoid rejection, to maintain a certain image. And the worst part is, it felt natural, like you were just being yourself, when in reality, you were being shaped in real time by whoever was in front of you. That's how most men live, not as rulers of their own mind, but as extensions of their environment, slightly different versions of themselves depending on who's watching, who's judging, who might leave. Praise lifts them. Criticism destabilizes them. Silence makes them anxious. And all of it is invisible, because it happens internally, quietly, beneath the surface. You felt it, that moment when someone disapproves of you, even subtly, and something shifts inside. A small contraction, a need to explain, to correct, to regain control of how you're perceived, or when you receive validation and suddenly your behavior softens, becomes more agreeable, more open, almost as if you're trying to preserve that approval. That's not confidence, that's dependency. I remember watching a man in a professional setting, sharp, capable, clearly competent, until his superior questioned him in front of others. Nothing aggressive, just a slight challenge, and in that moment, everything changed. His tone tightened. His words became rushed. He started over-explaining, trying to prove his point, not because he was wrong, but because he needed to be seen as right. And from that moment on, he lost authority in the room, not because of what was said, but because of how easily his internal state was moved. Now compare that to the man who hears the same challenge, and nothing in him shifts. Same posture, same tone, same pace. He listens, processes, responds without urgency. There's no emotional leakage, no need to defend his identity. And because of that, the dynamic reverses. People start watching him differently, more carefully, because there's something stable there, something that doesn't bend under pressure. It's sovereign psychology, not the absence of emotion, but the absence of submission to it. Most men think strength is controlling others, dominating situations, imposing presence. But real power begins earlier, quieter. It's the ability to remain unchanged when everything around you is trying to move you. When someone praises you and you don't react. When someone praises you and you don't lean in. When someone withdraws and you don't chase. That's control. Because the moment your emotional state depends on external input, you've already lost position. You've handed over the controls, and now anyone perceptive enough can steer you without you noticing. This is where brutal honesty comes in. You have to see exactly where you're still seeking approval, where you hesitate because of judgment, where you adjust yourself to avoid discomfort, and it won't feel good because it exposes the parts of you that are still negotiable, still influenced, still controlled. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that's where the shift begins. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause. You feel the impulse, the irritation, the need to respond, and you don't move. You observe it, almost like it's happening to someone else, and in that space, something new forms: choice. Anger stops being an outburst and becomes information. Fear stops being avoidance and becomes signal. Desire stops being impulsive and becomes direction. Everything slows down, not on the outside, but internally, and that internal stillness becomes your advantage. Over time, people notice, not consciously at first, but they feel it. You're harder to provoke, harder to impress, harder to destabilize, and because of that, they approach differently, more carefully, with more respect, not because you demanded it, but because you removed their ability to influence you. And that's the paradox. The man who cannot be controlled internally becomes impossible to control externally because there is no entry point, no emotional handle, no leverage. Your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a command center, every decision filtered, deliberate, precise, no wasted energy on emotional turbulence, no unnecessary reactions, no need to prove anything to anyone. And from that place, you don't just navigate the world, you dictate how it interacts with you. Law 5. There's a point where you realize something brutally simple: nobody actually cares about what you intend to do. They care about what you've already done, and until there's evidence, everything you say sounds like noise, even if it's intelligent, even if it's well-structured, even if it's true. Most men live trapped in explanation mode. They talk about plans, they outline strategies, they debate ideas as if clarity will substitute execution. They tell you what they're working on, what they're about to launch, what they could do if things align. And if you listen closely, it's always the same pattern: movement without consequence, activity without result, words standing in place of action. You've probably been that man at some point, talking through a vision, feeling a temporary sense of control just by articulating it, almost as if saying it out loud made it real. But then days pass, weeks pass, and nothing materializes, and deep down, there's a quiet frustration, not because you lack ability, but because you replaced execution with expression. I've seen this play out in brutal ways. A guy spends months talking about starting a business, refining the idea, discussing it with everyone around him, getting validation, feedback, encouragement, and another man, quieter, less impressive on the surface, starts something imperfect in a week. Fast forward 6 months. One is still talking, the other is operating, and suddenly the dynamic shifts, not because one is smarter, but because one moved. That's the difference. Action creates reality, and reality doesn't argue. In a world obsessed with perception, people don't evaluate your potential. They evaluate your output. They look for proof, something tangible, something visible. Because words can be shaped, intentions can be faked, but results are undeniable. They either exist or they don't. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable, because once you accept this, you lose the luxury of hiding behind ideas. You can no longer rely on sounding intelligent. You have to be effective. You have to produce. And production exposes you, it forces you into situations where you can fail publicly, where your limitations become visible, where there is no narrative to protect you. That's why most men avoid it, not consciously, but strategically. They stay in discussion, in planning, in endless refinement, because as long as nothing is executed, nothing can be judged. It's a safe zone disguised as productivity. But the man who understands this law steps out of that completely. He stops explaining, stops announcing, stops seeking validation for unfinished work, and just starts moving quietly, consistently, without the need to be seen in the process. I remember a situation where 2 men were competing for the same opportunity. One kept talking about his qualifications, his ideas, his vision, The other said very little, but delivered small, concrete results early, nothing dramatic, just consistent execution. And over time, the conversation stopped revolving around potential and started revolving around proof. The first man became irrelevant, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he lacked admittance. That's what execution does. It simplifies everything. You don't need to argue your value when it's visible. You don't need to defend your position when results speak for you. You don't need to convince anyone when reality already confirms it. And something else happens when you operate like this. Momentum builds. Not just externally, but internally. Every action sharpens your thinking. Every result refines your strategy. Every failure gives you data that no conversation ever could. You become faster, clearer, more precise, while others are still stuck debating possibilities. Over time, people start adjusting to you. They stop questioning, stop doubting, stop testing. Because there's a pattern of delivery that can't be ignored. Your presence alone signals competence. Not because of what you say, but because of what you consistently produce. And that's where the real shift happens. You stop needing recognition. Because results created automatically, you stop chasing influence. Because execution generates it naturally, you stop proving yourself through words. Because reality is already doing it for you. Because in the end, anyone can talk, but very few can point to something real and say, "This exists because I acted." Law 6. There's a moment most men avoid like a disease. The moment where you know, with absolute clarity, that something in your life is over, but you keep it alive anyway, out of habit, out of comfort, out of fear of what happens after you let go. And that hesitation, that quiet refusal to end it, is where your progress starts to rot. People like to talk about discipline, about growth, about becoming sharper, but almost no one talks about endings, clean, calculated, irreversible endings, because endings feel like loss, like failure, like admitting you were wrong. So instead, men drag things out. Relationships that died months ago. Projects that stopped making sense. Identities that no longer fit, all kept alive artificially, like a body on life support. You've done it, staying in something longer than you should, convincing yourself it might improve, that you've already invested too much to walk away. That ending it would somehow erase the effort you put in. But deep down, there's a voice, quiet but persistent, telling you the truth. This is no longer moving you forward. I remember a man who stayed in a relationship long after the respect was gone, not because he didn't see it, but because he feared starting over, feared the silence, the uncertainty. So he tolerated small signs at first, less enthusiasm, less attention, subtle disregard, until it escalated into open indifference. And by the time he finally walked away, he wasn't just leaving the relationship, he was recovering from months of slow erosion. That's what happens when you don't end things on time. They don't stay neutral, they decay, and in that decay, they take pieces of you with them. Your energy, your focus, your self-respect, all drain slowly while you convince yourself you're being patient. The same pattern shows up everywhere, a business idea that clearly isn't working, but you keep tweaking it instead of killing it. A social circle that adds no value, but you stay out of familiarity, even parts of your own identity, habits, beliefs, ways of thinking that once served you but now limit you, and you hold on to them because they feel like you. This is where ruthless intelligence draws a line. It stops romanticizing the past and starts calculating the present. It asks a simple question, brutally and without emotion: is this still serving the outcome I want? Or is it consuming resources with no return? Because every commitment in your life is an asset, and not all assets appreciate. Some depreciate quietly until they become liabilities, and the longer you hold them, the more they cost you time, energy, attention, things you don't get back. Ending something is not failure of warnings for me, but it requires a level of honesty most men avoid. You have to admit when something is no longer aligned, when the version of you that chose it is no longer the version of you that exists now, and that creates internal conflict. because it forces you to let go not just of the thing, but of the identity attached to it. There's also timing, end too early, and you might cut potential, end too late, and you bleed resources, and the only way to develop that sense is through awareness, watching patterns, tracking results, being honest about what's actually happening instead of what you hope will happen. Once the decision is made, hesitation is poison, dragging the ending, softening it, leaving doors half open. That's how things creep back in and trap you again. Decisive endings create clean space, and that space is where clarity returns. Over time, something shifts in you. You stop clinging, stop negotiating with things that don't serve you, stop holding on to situations out of emotion, and your life becomes lighter, sharper, more directed. Not because you added more, but because you removed what was holding you back. Because in the end, growth is not just about what you build, it's about what you have the discipline to end. Law 7. There's a brutal truth most men don't want to face. You're not stuck because you lack intelligence. You're stuck because your attention is scattered, diluted, constantly pulled in directions that feel urgent but lead nowhere. And every time you split your focus, you weaken your own trajectory. Look at how most men operate today. 10 tabs open, constant notifications, half-finished projects, new ideas every week, shifting priorities depending on mood, validation, or pressure. It feels like movement, it feels productive, but it's fragmentation, and fragmentation kills momentum quietly, without announcing itself. You felt this? Starting something with intensity, feeling locked in for a few days, maybe even a few weeks. Then something pulls you away, a new opportunity, a distraction, a message, a moment of doubt. And just like that, your energy shifts. The original path fades, not because it failed, but because you abandoned it before it could compound. I've seen men with real potential destroy their own progress like this. One guy building a business, gaining traction, starting to see results, then suddenly pivoting, chasing something better, something faster, something more exciting. 6 months later, nothing is built, just fragments of effort scattered across ideas. Meanwhile, another man, less talented on paper, stays locked on one path, repeating the same actions daily, refining, improving, enduring boredom, and eventually he becomes undeniable. That's the difference, not intelligence, not luck, focus. Because focus is not just about working hard, it's about rejecting everything that isn't aligned, and that's where it becomes difficult. Saying no to things that look good, opportunities that feel tempting, people who demand your time, even distractions that give you instant relief. Most men fail here, not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't have the discipline to ignore what to do. What doesn't matter? It's not just external, it's internal too. The urge to check, to switch tasks, to escape discomfort, to chase quick wins instead of staying in the slow, repetitive grind that actually builds something. That internal resistance is constant, and every time you give in, you reset your own momentum. There's a man I watched over time, same environment, same opportunities as everyone else, but he operated differently. No constant updates, no talking about what he was doing. No visible distraction, just consistent, almost boring execution. Day after day, same direction, same focus. People overlooked him at first, assumed he wasn't doing much, until results started appearing quietly, then all at once, and by then, it was too late to catch up. That's how unshakable focus works. It hides your progress until it's irreversible. When your attention is locked on one objective, everything changes, decisions become easier. Because they're filtered through one question: does this move me forward or not? If it doesn't, it's removed. No negotiation, no emotional attachment, and that creates speed. While others hesitate, you move. It also makes you resistant to manipulation, to drama, to noise, because those things only work when your attention is available, when your focus is occupied. They lose their entry point. You stop reacting, not because you're trying to be disciplined, but because you're already committed somewhere else. Over time, the compounding effect becomes undeniable. Small actions repeated daily start producing disproportionate results, while others are restarting over and over. You're stacking progress. Depth replaces randomness. Precision replaces chaos. And here's the part most people miss. Focus is not exciting. It's repetitive. It's restrictive. It forces you to let go of variety. But that restriction is what creates power. Because while everyone else is everywhere, you are somewhere specific, and that specificity turns into dominance. Your life stops feeling scattered. It becomes directional, deliberate, almost inevitable, like an arrow that's already been released. No hesitation, no deviation, just movement toward a defined target. Because in the end, the man who tries to do everything becomes nothing, but the man who commits to one path and refuses to be pulled away becomes impossible to stop. At a certain level, this stops being advice and starts becoming a line you either cross or avoid. Because once you see these patterns clearly, you can't go back to being the man who reacts, who explains, who drifts. You either tighten your behavior or you keep paying the price for not doing it. These aren't habits you casually apply when it's convenient. They're not tricks you use in specific situations. They are an operating system, a way of thinking that rewires how you move through everything. Conversations, decisions, relationships, pressure, everything becomes filtered through control, timing, and awareness. And this is where most men fail. They hear something like this. Feel the intensity, feel the truth in it, and then try to apply everything at once. They overcorrect, become rigid, unnatural, almost performative, and within days, they fall back into old patterns, not because the principles don't work, but because they tried to force transformation instead of building it. Real change is quieter than that. It starts with friction, the specific area in your life where things keep going wrong, where you feel disrespected, overlooked, out of control. That's your entry point. Not all 7 laws at once, just one, applied with precision, daily, under real pressure. Maybe it's the way you over-explain. Maybe it's how easily your mood shifts based on someone else's behavior. Maybe it's your inability to stay focused without drifting. Whatever it is, that's where you start. And when you apply just one of these laws consistently, something shifts almost immediately, not dramatically but noticeably. People respond differently. Conversations feel different. Your internal state becomes more stable. I've seen it happen in small but telling moments. A man who used to justify everything suddenly goes quiet when questioned, and the person in front of him, expecting a reaction, hesitates, fills the silence, reveals more than they intended, and just like that, the dynamic flips. No aggression, no dominance, just control. Or a man who used to chase validation pulls back, focuses on execution, stops announcing his moves. Weeks pass, and suddenly the same people who ignored him start paying attention, not because he asked for it, but because results made it unavoidable. That's how this builds, slowly then all at once. Each law reinforces the others. When you control what you reveal, you become harder to read. When you read others better, you react less. When you react less, your mind stabilizes. When your mind stabilizes, your actions become precise. When your actions become precise, results follow, and once results appear, everything changes. This is not about becoming cold for the sake of it. It's about becoming controlled, contained, impossible to move without your permission. Because the world will test you constantly, through distraction, through emotional pressure, through people trying to pull you into their frame. And if you're not anchored in something internal, you will shift. You will adapt to them instead of forcing reality to adapt to you. Most men live like that, reacting, adjusting, negotiating their own standards without even noticing. And over time, they lose clarity, lose direction, lose control, not in one moment, but in 1,000 small concessions. But when you operate differently, when your behavior is aligned with your own rules, your own standards, your own objectives, something changes. You stop asking for permission, Stop seeking approval, stop explaining your moves, and you start moving with intent. Every decision becomes a statement, not loud, not performative, but final. You stop leaking energy into things that don't matter. You cut what slows you down, you double down on what moves you forward. And over time, your life stops looking random. It starts looking engineered. Not perfect, but controlled. And that's the difference. Most people are shaped by their environment, but a man who internalizes this shapes it back.